So a long time ago, one of my rabbis said, if we really wanted to keep Shabbat, all we have to do is lie in bed all day with handcuffs and maybe even leg cuffs, and that way we don't break anything of Shabbat. But he said that based on this verse in the first Ten Commandments in the first tablets, that is not possible. We have to actively keep Shabbat. We have to actively remember Shabbat. We talked already about the drinking of the wine and the Havdalah and lighting the candles and all the other things. But in chapter 22 of Peninei, Rav Melamed talks about other things that help us basically bridge that gap between keeping Shabbat, even though it's not any of the melachot that we talked about until now, but also remembering Shabbat and sanctifying it as a day of rest. Last but not least, it is the law in Israel that any official visit to any country in the world, no matter where, the government officials representing Israel must observe the Shabbat in the public domain. So when Churchill died, I thought that Golda Meir was already prime minister, but I think that she was still only the minister of transportation. And so she got a hotel room with her delegation as close as possible to Westminster Abbey. And she was the only official who walked behind the hearse instead of being in a car on Shabbat. And they're also obligated to keep kosher in the public domain. If they want to order something non-kosher to their room, I'm guessing somehow that's okay. But in any public meal or whatever, they have to keep kosher. So the first time that the Ten Commandments talk about Shabbat is Zachorat Yom Shabbat Lagadsho, which, like I said, we talked about lighting candles and making Kiddush and Havdalah, etc. And the second time is written in the form of Shamorat Yom Shabbat Lagadsho, and the rabbis tell us that it's not that Hashem made a mistake, but rather that he was able to utter both words at the same time. So I'm not really sure what that is because I don't remember being at Mount Sinai. But in our Lechadodi, the first stanza is Shamor v'Zachor v'Dibur Echad, that both the Shamor, the keeping, the watching, to make sure to safeguard and to not break Shabbat, and the Zachor, the remembering of Shabbat as a day of rest, were said in one utterance in the Ten Commandments, and so that is the introduction to this chapter, chapter 22 of the mitzvah to preserve the Shabbat as a day of rest. So the Torah commands us to refrain from melacha on Shabbat, but the seventh day is Shabbat of the Lord your God. You should not do any melacha, any creative labor. That is any of the 39 types of melacha done while erecting the Mishkan, as explained to Moshe at Sinai, and the most of the chapters that we learned so far in Peninei part of Shabbat. Sages added safeguards, fences, so that no one would do anything that might then lead to the violation of a Torah prohibition. And there's other examples that we talked about. So there's an additional commandment in the Torah to rest on Shabbat. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall cease. And the word Shabbat, literally, like in Shvita, means in modern Hebrew, Shvita means protest and strike. We're not working, even though we can work, but we're not. And so Shvita means completely ceasing from doing work. And so the point here is that in addition to avoiding Melacha on Shabbat, like I suggested with handcuffs, we are also meant to cease and rest from toils and troubles. Thus, one should not open his store or move heavy objects in preparation for the work week, even though these are not included in the 39 prohibited categories of melacha. Nevertheless, acting in these ways negates the mitzvah of resting on Shabbat. So, when people want to understand exactly what the difference is between work and labor or creative labor, one of the examples I used to give was that you can run up and down the stairs carrying your couch, all day of Shabbos, but you're not allowed to switch a light switch on. So according to Rav Melamed, that also is prohibited because it's not resting. I don't think that he's going to say that it's mash asur. If you enjoy doing exercise like that, it would be allowed, but it's just the idea that also heavy lifting, especially when it's intentional for the preparation for the work week, is prohibited. Continuing with this line of thought, we find the prophets enjoining us to preserve the holy and sanctified atmosphere of Shabbat, a day on which one must avoid mundane activities. One who is careful to follow this merits great rewards, as Yeshayahu proclaims. This is the iftar that we read for Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. If you refrain from trampling the Shabbat, from pursuing your affairs on my holy day, if you call Shabbat delight, oneg, the Lord's holy day, honored, and if you honor it, so that's what's called kvod Shabbat and oneg Shabbat, and not go in your own way or nor look to your affairs. So you're not allowed to visit your field, for example, even though you're not going to fix a broken fence or uproot a weed or whatever. It's still not the right way to observe Shabbat, nor speak of them. So you're not even allowed to plan. Then you will seek the Lord's delight. I will set you astride the heights of the earth and let you enjoy the heritage of your father Yaakov, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So that's the Haftarah for Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. And the Sephardi and some Hasidic custom is to start with that paragraph before the Kiddush on Shabbat morning. The sages derive many guidelines about Shabbat from these verses, and the common denomination is that one should not behave on Shabbat as one does during the week. So the Gemara elaborates, honor it. Your Shabbat clothes should not be like your weekday clothes, and nor go in your own way. The way that you walk on Shabbat should not be like the way you walk on weekdays, in terms of like running as opposed to walking. In the Yiddish word spazier, which means to, I don't know how common that is outside of Jerusalem, but in the many Shabbatot I've spent in Jerusalem, it is amazing to see these older couples, and the man always has their hands locked behind their back. That way they're not busy doing anything and just walking pleasantly and slowly, not because they can't walk quickly, but because they want to honor Shabbat in that way. Nor look to your affairs. It is forbidden to look after your own affairs on Shabbat, but one may look after the affairs of heaven, i.e., religious matters, nor speak of them. Your speech on Shabbat should not be like your speech on weekdays. Speaking about mundane matters is forbidden, but thinking about them is permitted. And in My Yedidut, one of the most amazing songs about Shabbat, we say that L'Shadecha Banot is permitted, not because it's not an activity of the weekday, of matchmaking, but rather because it is spiritual and it is for the purpose of making the kingdom of Hashem in this world even more special. These directives have a higher status than general rabbinic enactments, since they are rooted in the Torah's commandment to rest and are elaborated upon by the prophets. Nehemiah, even though he's not considered as a prophet according to our understanding of the Tanakh, made sure that the gates of Jerusalem were locked on Shabbat, so that even non-Jewish merchants were not allowed to bring their produce in on Shabbat, and that again is the public face, the public representation of keeping Shabbat. El Al does not fly on Shabbat except for emergency, like saving people and stuff like that. I don't know what day of the week 4th of July 1976 was, but again, it's for emergency purposes, it's allowed. We have already explained that the mitzvot connected to honoring and delighting the Shabbat in chapters 2, 4, 5, and 7. Honor, kavod, is expressed by wearing special Shabbat clothes, showering, cleaning the house, and lighting candles. And it's even more relevant this week, as both the Sephardim and Ashkenazim have the customs of the week that Tisha B'Av is in, and the Ashkenazim is from Rosh Chodesh. We don't have to wait until like 10 minutes before Shabbat to take our shower for Shabbat. This Friday, it is common practice that you're allowed to take your regular shower that you do on Friday for Shabbat. Same like during Shiva. Delight, oneg, is expressed by making Shabbat enjoyable through meals, sleep, and Torah study. In this chapter, we will explain the mitzvot and the rabbinic safeguards meant to protect Shabbat's atmosphere as a holy day of rest. These mitzvot are at the root of everything that the sages through the ages forbade as a weekday activity. And again, it can change because social and cultural acceptable things do change. I'll just give one example before we continue. The Mishnah Berurah in the Shulchan, commenting on the Shulchan Aruch, says that if you have a Jewish plumber in your community and you have a problem with your toilet that happened on Shabbat, you see him at Mincha, you're allowed to say, "Are you able to come to my house on Motzei Shabbos?" You don't tell him what the exact issue is. You don't tell him what the plan is, and obviously he understands that you'll pay him because that's the right way. But you are allowed to ask him if he's available on Motzei Shabbos. So that's a safeguard. But on the other hand, we're not going to stop life because of Shabbat, especially when there's it's bothering your oneg Shabbat that the toilet is plugged, etc. So any activity that is unquestionably mundane is prohibited on Shabbat. This includes ball playing for adults, swimming, working out, and bike riding. To protect the spirit of Shabbat, the sages also introduced the prohibition of muktzeh, as explained in the next chapter, and ordained that one may not play musical instruments in the halachot 17 to 19 below. So we'll stop here. I think we just exactly 10 minutes because we started late, and we'll open up for questions